Hello and welcome to the Surgical Spirit podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Haidar Al-hakim, the Third Eye Doctor. Pull up a chair and get ready for some candid and uncompromising discussion with experts, innovators, agitators, and influential people from every corner of health and well-being. From inside the hospital to at home in the kitchen, we're leaving no stone unturned in our quest to uncover the secrets of healthier, happier, more successful, and less stressful lives. Thank you so much for joining us, and without further ado, let's meet this episode's guest. Hello, Sheela. How are you?
Hi, I am good. Thank you, Haidar.
I love the sort of picture behind you. You've got this sort of half-naked woman in some sort of swimming gear. What's that about?
So at the top, it actually says, I go into the water, and then I think it's to lose my mind and find my soul. Does it say that?
I don't know. I can't read it because I think it's back to front.
Yeah. Into the water I go to lose my mind and find my soul. So I'm a big open water swimming fan. I got into it. I actually got into it. Someone asked me this the other day. The first time I went into a quarry in my wetsuit in 2012. And I remember sitting there for about 20 minutes before I plucked up the courage to actually get in the water. And then gradually one thing led to another, and the wetsuit came off end of 2018, I think. So I think I'm in my fourth season of winter swimming, so no wetsuit, and dabbling with getting rid of the neoprene gloves and boots, but it is quite stabby. So they're a little bit of a comfort blanket, but yes, that's my thing. And someone shared an article with me yesterday which talks about how dopamine gets raised with cold water immersion, but I think it's below 11 degrees and goes up by 250%, matching that you get with high class drugs, but without the after drop.
250 as in 250?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's for me, I call it a reset button. It just,
wow.
You could go down to the beach worrying about something, go into the water, and you come out and you cannot even remember what it was what was on your mind. It's just because your whole body's just got to stop and go, oh, what is going on right now? What are you doing? And yeah, then of course, when you come out, it's busy trying to get you warm again. So, I know it's become really popular, particularly through lockdown. And there are obviously dangers associated with it. It's all about acclimatization. But yes,
so what was the first time like? Could you sort of tell us about that? And because I'm sure there's a few listeners out there who are thinking, maybe for me.
And this is the thing, actually, because when I first moved down to Dorset, which was 5 years ago, I saw people doing it and thought that'd be so cool to be like one of those people, that I don't think I dare. And then I found a couple of groups that I swim with in my wetsuit, and someone just said to me, well, why don't you do a swim in your wetsuit, and then when you're finished, take the wetsuit off and just go in, because you're your body's already used to it, your hands and feet are used to it, and so that's what I did. And it was like, oh, that's not as cold as I thought it was. So there's that slight acclimatization. And it kind of just carried on from there. And then I got to the point where I realized it was actually quite a faff to put a wetsuit on. And then one day I was so cold, I was struggling to get out of my wetsuit, and I sort of dislocated my thumb because it all went all the way back. And because my hands were so cold, I didn't even realize I'd done it. And it was only as I started to warm up that I thought, oh, that thumb really hurts actually, and I still get a bit of pain from it. And so I think that it put me off, and I thought, well, I'm not going to bother with the wetsuit anymore. And yeah, just carried on. And obviously I don't go in the winter. I manage about 10 minutes, but it's quite stabby. I call it stabby. Like that's people. A lot of people measure the temperature on their watch, and I just like it's either cold, stabby, or very stabby. That's how I measure it.
Wow. And the first time you went in with your wetsuit, what was that like?
So the first time I went in with the wetsuit, I remember being just more scared about getting into this quarry because it was quite dark and black, and I think my fear was what is underneath the water, even though rationally I knew it couldn't be anything. But yeah, I remember once I was in, feeling like, oh, this is amazing, because there's something about when you're in the water, you're just completely held by nature. You can't get any closer to nature, but when that water is all around you, and when like you come out and as your body, you spend a while sort of jumping about, feeling like, am I ever going to get warm again? And there's this sort of swimmer's dance that everyone does. And then when that warmth starts to come through, you really get that, oh, that was amazing, that was amazing, that was amazing. It doesn't make it any easier the next time you go in, but you do hang on to that when you're walking in the water, because you know how amazing it's going to feel afterwards. It is something that you've just got to, you've got to overcome the thought that, so there's the fact is the water is cold, and that's not going to change. The thought is, it's too cold for me to go in. That is just a thought that's in our imagination. And when I talk about taking a pair of scissors to that thought, if you cut the thought away, so it's cold, I'm going to go in anyway, like that, the action, and then you kind of move over it. Now, I mean, it sounds simple, it's a practice, isn't it? But there is something about recognizing what the thought is and the fact that that's not actually true.
Yeah. I mean, whenever I get into the water, I always think of Jaws. I don't know why. It's just sort of been ingrained into me from multiple watching it on many times. And yeah, and as you said, you've just got to like overcome that thought. I mean, it's totally irrational, but it's always there. And I went one time into the open waters with a wetsuit, and yeah, it was quite horrifying, actually.
I think it also depends on whether you can actually see, because obviously in the UK the seas aren't as clear as many other places, and it makes quite a big difference if you can see the bottom when you're swimming. If it's just murky, you really literally don't know what's down there, and there's no difference to when it's clear, but in your head there's some big monster that's going to come and like bite your face.
I mean, I mean, I felt some sort of slimy stuff underneath me occasionally, and the rest was just sort of duck poo everywhere.
Oh,
and, you know,
where were you swimming?
Well, I'm not going to say where, because it's not going to sound very good for them. But yeah, it was sort of all kinds of weird things, and you swallow quite a bit of it. I was quite surprised how much you swallow.
Yeah, and to be fair, talking about like where did you swim, my first event was the World Triathlon. It just happened to be the world. I wasn't competing as a world athlete, but and it was in Hyde Park, so the swim was in the Serpentine. So yeah, there are plenty.
That like
nicer places to that. Well, yeah, you couldn't see anything, and when you're doing the start line of a triathlon, you're usually getting bashed over the head by someone's arm and then kicked by someone's foot. So it's, there are much more pleasant, quieter, more serene places to go, I have since learnt.
Where's the sort of the best places you've ever swam at, and that really I think, talks to you?
Yeah, so in abroad, I can't remember the name of the island now, but I was lucky enough to stay on a friend's boat, and we were there was one island, I cannot remember the name of it, but it was pretty much uninhabited, and so I was able to swim from the boat to the shore, and there's just no one there, and it's the first time I've ever really experienced that the silence was deafening, because there was just no sound, and then a few birds and things. But then in the UK, in the Lake District, just around the back of Scafell, which is the highest UK peak, there's a lake called Sprinkling Tarn. And so it's the highest open water place that you can swim. And when I went up there, I was the only one in this lake creating these ripples that were going. And that was pretty cold, but it's pretty special to be, because you can only get up there by hiking up there. So pretty special place that.
Wow. And there's this kind of sort of notion of soul and sort of quietness, and I guess that does it for you.
Yeah, because you can't think about anything else when your body's immersed in that cold water, because it is cold, and you're forced to look at your immediate surroundings. So you're in that lake looking up at Scafell, and it just reminds you of the beauty of the world and how we're such a small, insignificant part in it, really. So it it just really grounds you, or floats you. So
yeah, sort of floating existence, and I mean, as you said, sort of letting nature support you.
yeah, and every single swim is different, particularly when you're swimming in the sea. The wind direction changes, the tide's changing, it's a bit stormy at the moment, so the seaweed's all just like held in the water, and it's all swishing around, and so no two swims are ever the same. And I think that's part of the appeal as well. From a safety perspective, you have to be aware of all those different things, but also from a experience, it just brings something different every time.
And sort of any horror stories, any horrible moments you'd like to share with the audience today?
I don't want to put anyone off, Haidar. It's all about getting people into the water. I don't think
no one's drowned in front of you.
No
or
one's drowned in
like
front of me.
Yeah.
There was one incident where sometimes you feel, because you're constantly thinking, is there something underneath me? You almost start to hallucinate sometimes. And there was once when I was swimming along, and I'm breathing both sides, and I took a look to the one side, and I thought I saw like a dead shark, like upside down on the base of the seabed, and it was only down at Camford Cliffs, near me down in Poole. And so I thought, you must have been like hallucinating. That's absolutely ridiculous. I mean, they weren't huge, probably like half my size. And then I got to the swim club the next day and said, oh, I was swimming yesterday, I'm sure I was hallucinating, because I thought I saw these two dead sharks. And she went, oh no, someone else has reported that in the group, said that there were some dead sharks up at Camford Cliffs. And that was a bit of a moment, because they weren't huge, but they were sharks. And so that's probably the only unusual story.
And obviously you're wrestling with your mind and sort of that kind of stuff. How did you get over it?
Well, I just swam as fast as I could. Because I sort of tried to say to myself, that's not true, because otherwise you might freak yourself out of the water and never get back in again. Because the plus side of that wildlife, and I'm a bit annoyed that this hasn't happened to me yet, but there have been sightings of dolphins down at Poole and in the harbour, and so you can hallucinate in the other way and see ripples of waves and think they're dolphins, but I haven't seen any yet, but they are there to be spotted.
Wow. So and what made you go to Dorset? I mean, did something happen that you thought to yourself, I've had enough of this, I'm getting out?
That pretty much was about the sum of it. So in fact, almost 5 years today, so 17th of May, was the day that I was sitting in a meeting with my manager, and I was staring out the window thinking, I don't think I really want to do this anymore. But I'd said it out loud, and then he said, are you resigning? And I went, yeah. And I had thought about it, but I hadn't planned that particular conversation. And so I walked out of the meeting, because he said, are you resigning? And I walked out of the meeting, and I was like, what have you done? And then the other half of me was this helium balloon going, woohoo, you did it, I mean, you're free now. And that was on the back of, you can give it whatever label you like: stress, burnout, depression. I was not in a very good place, and I had a chunk of time out of work to work out what I really did want to do. And this was on the back of getting back into the work and thinking, this just isn't working for me. And so I finished up that role, and then I literally had no plan B. So I found myself.
What role was it?
So I was a learning consultant. I think that was my title. How quick you forget. So I was managing a team of consultants who were designing training material for organizations when they were changing their computer software or implementing it. And I would do change and training. And then prior to that, I was sort of HR generalist at Kraft Foods when Kraft bought out Cadbury, so that whole huge merger. So I found myself a coach to figure out what I really did want to do. And over the course of that, thought, I don't think I'm the only person that kind of gets to a point in their life and thinks, what am I doing? Like, is this it? And that there were probably things that might have suited me better to support me in finding a way to enjoy that role better, or different support mechanics possibly. And I was thinking about, I don't want other people in the situation that I was in. What can I do? And having had counselling and coaching, I was like, you know what, coaching is a real way for people to find out for themselves what they really want. So
what made you go to see a coach or a counsellor? Or
because I just thought, I don't know what to do, and I don't know where to start in thinking about it. And so, I mean, the counselling was when I was off sick from work,
right,
and that was more about getting me like processing. Often there's loads of stuff, like I call it rocks in your rucksack. There's loads of rocks in your rucksack. You're walking around, it's really, really heavy. A lot of it doesn't serve you. And that counselling was, right, let's get these out and let's like sort them all out. And that can happen in coaching as well, but it sort of depends how heavy and gnarly and knotty those rocks are as to whether you need to kind of go down the psychotherapy counselling route, or whether the coaching can like work through them. And so in working with the coach, I got such a great sense of like control, and thought, if I'm going to make change, then I'm gonna go big. So I started training up to be a coach, and in amongst all of that, I thought, oh, I want to live by the seaside actually. So I was living in Warwick, just outside Birmingham, probably the most landlocked that you can get. And I'm going to go down and live by the seaside. And so just up sticks, and because I think that was one of my principles, that I want to do work where I can work from anywhere. And I often meet my clients on the beach, walking, talking, and all that open space where we can do some amazing thinking is working for me, and it's working for the people that want to do something different with their lives, or want to get a better balance. So that was a long answer to your question.
Yeah, and I mean, it's quite interesting how coaching can be sort of many hats really, and which to a certain extent does give it a bad name, because it's not the route is not very prescribed. It could sort of be anywhere and sort of at any time. How long were you in the HR industry for?
I was thinking about this earlier. So I joined in 2009. So and I still do. So I'm still a member of the CIPD, and I volunteer on the local committee. I was running a session this morning. I have like a special interest for coaching, but in terms of employed HR roles, good 10 years.
Mm-hmm. And has HR changed over the years, and if so, what's your view on it?
So I'm probably not as close to be able to answer that. I think I remember really clearly when I took this secondment into HR to start with, and someone saying to me, "Oh, you're joining the secret police," and I was like, "What? I don't understand what you mean." Well, obviously I do now, it had that in some places they still do have that reputation. But if you look in forward thinking companies, you see that HR are actually like supporting people in the organization to support, it's like line managers to support their teams. So they're supporting them with building coaching skills and mental health awareness and things like that. So I think HR sometimes does get this reputation that like, oh, well, they're going to find me someone to do that job. Well, actually, if you want someone in your team, the sort of person that you want to do that, and HR might support you in terms of like where you need to go to find that person, what sort of questions to ask in interview, and like, so they're facilitating it rather than doing it. And it's, as far as I'm aware, that is where HR is moving, but it's it's a big ship to steer, I guess. I feel like I'm not, like I say, not completely qualified, because I'm sort of very much on the peripherals of like central HR, if you like.
I mean, have you ever sort of going back and creating change within the core HR movements?
Probably not, because I love what I'm doing so much now.
Yeah.
And when I went into coaching, it was about helping sort of individuals, and I remember being really I don't want to do any work with any other corporates or organizations, I just want to work with individuals. And as I've moved on and done more training and done more work, and people have invited me into their organizations, it kind of overcame that fear, and now I quite enjoy working with teams in organizations. And I've also expanded my coaching work, so I'm a coach supervisor, so I supervise the work of other coaches, and a mentor coach, so I observe others coaching, and then we discuss how we might be able to sharpen their skills there. So I've expanded within the coaching space, which I think is giving me the challenge that I need in terms of driving me.
Who's your favorite coach? Who's for your favorite popular coach that many people have heard about? Or that doesn't exist? Maybe it's an oxymoron.
Well, no, I think so. My favorite coach is Michael Bungay Stanier. He set up a company called The Box of Crayons. He's got a book called The Coaching Habit, which is a book of 7 questions where he believes people can coach in 10 minutes. So it's designed for managers who want to use coaching to support their teams. And then he also brought out a book called The Advice Trap, because the biggest thing you have to overcome with coaching is giving out advice, because as humans, we're all very willing to tell people what we did and how we would do it, and actually that won't work in everyone's world. And that's the example that I use, is when people say, I really need something to switch off from work, and I say, well, I could tell you to go and jump in the sea in the middle of winter, because that'll give you a reset. That works for me, though. It probably won't work for a whole chunk of other people. And so when I say that to people, they get it. They're like, yeah, no, that really wouldn't work for me. So what would work? And then almost instantly they come up with their own ideas. So that Advice Trap book is really good. And through lockdown, he had a podcast called We Will Get Through This, and he talked to all sorts of specialists about resilience and different things. And he had some great speakers on there. I think he's just he's very down to earth, and he's just got some great ideas about how we can just keep it quite simple. So I think, yeah, I would say he's probably the one that stands out.
I mean, doctors have this kind of they don't like the word resilience, because it means that it's not the system's fault, it's their fault, essentially. How would you counteract that sort of notion and that idea?
Yeah, and I think resilience has become this buzzword, and when you really dig into it, so I'm doing some research at the moment, and the working title is which elements of resilience and well-being are impacted by formal workplace coaching. And in order to do that research, I need to have a definition for resilience and for well-being, so we know what we're working with. And there are no universally agreed definitions. And there's one key researcher called Bonanno, who talks about you can't really measure resilience until someone has faced a traumatic event, because resilience is how quickly we bounce back from something. So how do we know how quickly we may or may not bounce back from something until we actually have an event? And I don't particularly want my research to be around, right, I need to find some people who are going to have a traumatic event, so that, and then measure it afterwards. And I think, yes, I hear that piece about, it's not is it the system or is it me? So it's about being resilient to the system. And then, because one key thing about resilience is our sense of control, and where people have an internal locus of control, they're more likely to be more resilient than those who have an external locus of control. So what I mean by that is, an external locus of control is, I'm driving along and there's a truck coming towards me and I can't do anything about the fact that truck is coming towards me. an internal locus of control says there's a truck coming towards me, I could turn left, that might put me in the ditch. I could turn right, that might put me in the central reservation. I could slam my brakes on. So it's about recognizing this is how I can respond to what's happening in front of me. So that's where the resilience is not about just standing firm and going, I'm going to put up with this. It's about choosing how we work our way around that. And another quote that I think is brilliant from, you might have come across, but the book A Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. And so he says in that, between any stimulus and response is space, and in that space is our opportunity to choose, and that's where we get freedom and growth. So the more we grow that space to give ourselves some time to make the choices, is where we've got the opportunity to choose how we respond to things. So I think that's what my thinking is around that, but it's still emerging, and I'm always happy to talk to more people about that, and particularly because I've got this huge research project where I need 60 coaches to enlist clients so that we can actually look at, because I think that resilience and well-being, and I've broken that down into component parts, is like a byproduct of coaching. So it happens even if you're not talking about things. And it's come from clients that I've been working with. At the end of their coaching sessions, the program, they mark themselves in these elements of well-being, and things like sleep. They were saying sleep was improving and activity was improving. We've never had a conversation about sleep, never had a conversation about activity. And I think it comes from the activity, probably a sense of control. Okay, I want to do this activity. I'm going to choose to make this time for it. And sleep, I think we process things overnight when we process challenges, and that the old phrase, sleep on it. If we're processing that stuff in a coaching conversation, in our conscious waking hours, does that take it off the brain's load? And so when we sleep, we're not working through that as well, so we sleep a bit better. So these are the things that I'm finding like really fascinating, and it's other coaches are coming forward and think, yeah, that is really fascinating, and how do we get to the bottom of that and figure that out? So I'm quite excited by what we might be able to find there, because we could find ourselves in a position where we can say coaching could be a strategy for well-being, never mind sort of spas and smoothies and offering things that we don't know that people need. Give them the space to think what they actually want, and then it boosts on its own. So yeah.
I mean, I agree with you. Having these sort of essentially me times, to really have that time and that essentially space to work through all these difficult ideas, essentially.
Yeah.
I think we need to do this again, because I need to sort out my Zoom so that we can have a longer conversation, because it's about to close in about a minute's time.
We don't want to end mid-sentence.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I mean, having more time to talk and to work through these interesting and challenging ideas. And I think, if you don't have time to talk about these challenging ideas, then you're definitely going to burn out and get stressed.
Yeah. And they ruminate. And I say, jive with your joy more than you ruminate on your rubbish.
Yeah, that sounds really great. How can people get hold of you and help you with your project, your research, your coaching project?
Yeah, so if you look me up, bluegreencoaching.com, and there's under the business section, there's a page about the research. But my email address is there, my phone number, you can book in my diary and we can have a conversation. And LinkedIn is the other place. I'm quite active there. So yeah, please get in touch. I'm always up for talking more about all of this good stuff.
Thank you, Sheela. It's been great.
Thank you, Haidar.